Hi, I'm Ken. I need to start off today with a correction to my previous video. I showed these stamps. I called them postal fiscal stamps from New Zealand, and it's true for two of these stamps, but a keen-eyed viewer pointed out that the rest of these stamps are from New South Wales. Really, what a blunder. It's like I can't even read. Look, it's plain as day. The one on the left is indeed from New Zealand, but the one on the right is obviously from New South Wales. I'd like to say that the New South Wales stamps were also postal fiscal stamps, but they weren't. They're just regular revenue stamps, although some of them would go on to be overprinted for use as postage. Oh well, it's a minor blunder, I hope, since the error didn't fundamentally change the content of the video, despite the bad example and my misidentification. And thank you, Stephen, for helping me see this problem. That's part of the point of this channel, to share and learn together. I'm a little embarrassed, but so happy you reached out. Now enough of that. Today we're going to talk about the US 1902 series, otherwise known as the Second Bureau issues. Let's take a look at my stamps. Let me get my book open here. Turning the page, we're going to the series of 1902 stamps. A lot to go through here in the early days. Baby banknotes here, banknotes, and then this right here. These are my stamps from this series. Unlike the previous baby banknote series or the Washington Franklin stamps that follow these, I can fit this entire set on a single album page. I've got examples of every design, but not many great copies. Here, I'll pop up pictures of the whole set. The first stamp in this series was the 13-cent Benjamin Harrison stamp. This came out shortly after Harrison's death and was the first 13-cent stamp issued by the post office. It came out in November of 1902. The only other stamp of this series to come out in 1902 was the 8-cent Martha Washington stamp, which came out in December. This Martha Washington stamp was the first U.S. stamp to feature a woman. Despite that, just these two stamps came out in 1902, but this whole series is called the Series of 1902. Each of these stamps, it turns out, bears an inscription saying Series 1902. They're tiny on the stamp. Let me zoom in on them. That's odd, right? Most of the stamps in this series came out in 1903, but still each was inscribed with 1902. You might think that's because they were all designed in 1902, which would make sense, except that the second 2-cent stamp, sorry, that's better. That second 2-cent stamp didn't even get designed until 1903. It turns out that the first 2-cent stamp, the one with the draped flags on the side, well, people didn't like that stamp, so the post office redesigned it with, in my opinion, more boring stamp with the shield design. Ugh. I think that's one of the ugliest designs in early US stamp history. While this series is sometimes called the Series of 1902, it was also known as the Second Bureau issue. The Bureau in this case refers to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. The first Bureau issue is the stamps that are also sometimes called the baby banknotes, these stamps. These are the stamps with the triangles in the top corner. Actually, there was an earlier version of these stamps without the triangles, but those weren't printed by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Those were printed by the American Banknote Company. The Bureau didn't really design these stamps, they just added the little triangles in the corners. Nonetheless, these stamps are known as the first Bureau issues. So while these stamps are called the Second Bureau issues, they are the first regular issue designs by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and they really wanted to show off with this set of new designs. Each stamp has a different design, unified in style, of course. It's easy to tell they're all from the same set. Well, of course, except for that second 2-cent design. Such a shame. Anyway, each stamp is ornate and done in a modern style, with many of them having design elements emblematic of the person on the stamp. Let's take a look. This first design, by tradition, features the nation's first postmaster, Benjamin Franklin. One thing to notice about this design is the two dates, 1706 and 1790. Every stamp in this series lists the birth and death years of the person on the stamp. On this stamp, there's one other interesting detail. The two figures are holding up light bulbs representing Franklin's inventiveness, specifically in his work understanding electricity. People hated this design, though, thinking it and the others looked like caricatures. The design on the left was the first one released with this series. Washington, again by tradition, on the stamp covering the regular letter rate. This stamp and the Franklin stamp for the postcard rate are abundant, but the stamp on the left was so hated that the design was replaced by the one on the right by the next year. I certainly prefer the one on the left. I'm not aware of any iconography on the first stamp, but the leaves around the numbers on the second stamp are laurel and oak leaves. They refer to Washington as both a leader in war and in peace. This 3-cent stamp features Andrew Jackson. Those two bearded figures with the shield belt buckles seem significant. I don't know what they represent, although it could be Hercules, who is often represented with a beard and a shield, so perhaps a symbol of strength. The eagles, flags, and oak leaves on this stamp represent Grant's military victories. On this Lincoln stamp, the two women with intertwined palm leaves represent Lincoln's reunification of the North and the South. For me, these two women evoke Columbia and America, two personifications of the United States in iconography. I'm skipping over the Grant stamp to this Martha Washington stamp. This is the first U.S. stamp to feature a woman who wasn't an allegory. In this 10-cent stamp, Daniel Webster is flanked by fasces, which at this time in history represented government strength through unity, something that Webster was a strong advocate for. Benjamin Harrison was known for his work on education. His stamp features muses of learning, one reading a book and the other making a sculpture of a child. This $1 stamp featuring Admiral Farragut includes a Marine and a sailor. Chief Justice John Marshall was honored on this $5 stamp. The figures in the upper corners represent liberty and justice blindfolded. I didn't cover all the stamps here because they don't all include images that I could find references to. There's President Garfield on the 6-cent stamp, Henry Clay on the 15-cent stamp, and of course Thomas Jefferson at 50 cents, and finally Dolly Madison's husband, President James Madison, on the $2 stamp. Despite the unified feel of this series, each stamp is different in design, including the layout of each stamp and the fonts used in the various design elements of the stamp. Notice, for example, how the 5s are different on the 5-cent, 15-cent, 50-cent, and $5 stamps. Even the dollar sign is different across the 3 high-value stamps, with the $2 sign only having a single line through it. It's amazing how unified this set looks, well, except for that second 2-cent stamp. Awful. Unfortunately, despite how nice these look to me, these stamps were short-lived. They were replaced starting in 1908, 6 short years, with the uniform and boring Washington Franklin series. Give the people what they want, I guess. Let's take a break from these for a moment. I want to take a moment to thank some viewers for sending some stamps my way. First, I've been trading some stamps with Steven. Steven's working in Malta and kindly sent me some modern Malta stamps. A lot of these. Let me bring this up here. He first sent me this card right here. This is a lot of large format regular issues from Malta. Let's get that on camera. There we go. Some smaller format, but Malta has a lot of very interesting stamps. So he sent me this card. He also sent me a smaller card, which I really appreciated. It has some of those larger stamps used, but it also has a couple of war tax stamps. And so that for me is a double area of collecting. I really enjoy those. And then here's a nice cover from the Maltese government. This cover has some used stamps on it, and so I really enjoy having this nice cover from the Maltese government, I guess it's called. Thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate it. Next, I want to share a thank you to Graham from the UK. He sent along another group of Machen stamps, this packet right here. This has stamps for the museum. Graham has sent me some stamps before, and you know, indeed, the museum collects entirely from donations. Modern stamps like these are a little bit harder to find. Graham sent these my way. There's a whole pile of them, a whole rack, which is great. Modern stamps like this are a little bit hard to find. Graham sent along an update of these for the museum, but also there are some duplicates in here for my own collection. Graham, thanks a lot for your continued support of the museum and of my channel. Finally, I want to thank Ted from New Jersey. Ted sent along a large box of Machins for the museum. I have them right here. I think I need to put together a next update for that Machin project based on all the great material that both Ted and Graham have sent along. Anyway, Ted sent along Machins in various more unusual formats. I've got here in this packet, he sent them in 3 different small packets inside this box. First of all, he sent along a whole bunch of let's see, a whole bunch of Machin stamp booklets. That's a really nice thing. There's booklet and booklet and booklet in here. Let me give you some examples. So booklets on the front, a couple of interesting formats. These red style booklets are in here. I've got a lot of these small style booklets. Anyway, just a nice set of booklets. In a second package was a pack of envelopes that had Machin related material on them. I won't go open these all right now, but there's a lot of nice Machin oriented envelopes here. That's here. There's also a nice booklet from Hong Kong. And then finally, in the last packet that he sent along was some really unusual formats that were available. One of them here is these Frama labels. I think I'm saying that right. These are computer vended postage. Really nice format of stamps that are kind of hard to find. There's 2 pages of these along with some material that explains them. On another card is a whole bunch of what are these called? Computer vended labels. These are nice, a whole selection of these. That's great. Next in this is another odd format. This odd format is called Post and Go. These are Post and Go labels. Another computer vended postage style, both in collector's packs and the formats. And then on top of this, we have counter sheets. Counter sheets sent over. This is how they would be delivered at the post office. So nice format of these counter sheets. There's another format here. This is what's called the business sheet. This turns out is the cover of the business sheet. There would be a pack of 50 stamps in this, I believe. These cover sheets just have 2 stamps on them, but these are how they were collected, apparently. Then what else have we got in here? These are different ways that counter and business sheets got delivered. And then the next thing I want to show is something that's quite interesting and unusual and unique to British postage stamps. It's something called the Boots label. Boots labels were a special format of stamps that were designed to be shipped on a greeting card. And so this is a greeting card. Make sure the light doesn't shine on this too much. This is a greeting card as it would have been sold by the Boots greeting card company in Great Britain. And they would put on top of the card here a little triangle cutout that included free postage, a postage stamp in this format for this. So that's quite unusual, I think, first of all, to get it on the card, but also quite an interesting format to deliver postage. I know that whenever I buy a greeting card and I need to mail it, I'd sure love it to come with a stamp like this. Anyway, this special format was collected by collectors, and Ted sent a whole lot of examples of these. These are collector's versions of these. They aren't already folded onto a greeting card, but collectors were able to buy them unfolded, and they had lots of information in the selvage. I think that's a really interesting format to collect Machins in. That's that. And then the third thing here is Ted sent along this envelope. This envelope has up in the top corner here a complete label put onto the envelope. Typically, these would be ripped out of the envelope. They're perforated, and then just the stamp would be stuck on the envelope. So it's kind of unusual to have the stamp and the entire sheet on an envelope. Very rare to see it in that format. So this is a really fascinating style of format of delivery. Anyway, all these sheets, the collections, they're just wonderful things for the museum, and I really appreciate getting those. Not to be left out, Ted tucked in a large envelope for me as well, for my own collection. Let me set this aside and bring that up. That envelope really would be its own set of episodes, but we're not going to do it here. But let's give just a sense of what's here. I mean, I think let's start out with this first stamp, which is a hologram stamp from Mongolia. So I love that odd format. I'm not sure you can see the hologram details on it. It's a Zeppelin stamp. Yeah, there we go. It's a Zeppelin stamp that shines differently. There's some shaped stamps from Sierra Leone here. I think those are fantastic. Let's see. There's a number of other Machen definitives on the back here. Down here, there's some #1 stamps from Ghana and Zambia, plus the later overprints of those same stamps. This is really nice. Let's see, what else do I want to highlight? Oh, the next thing I want to highlight on this is this sheetlet, this mini sheet from China that came out this year. It's getting a little hard to get that on camera. This mini sheetlet that came from China this year. This is about the beauty of mathematics, and it's really a sheet. And Ted told me that I should use a UV light on this one. So I'm going to just turn on this UV light. This is the safe for my eyes version of the UV light, so don't get too weirded out by it. Anyway, when I shine this, let me see if I can pull this off. When I shine this on the stamps, you get, well, that's not working too well. So what I'm going to do is put an overhead shot. Let's talk about that in a minute with an overhead shot. Okay, so that looks like it's going to work better. Let me turn on the light. I think you can see right now, first of all, I want to point out on the sheet right here that there is a serial number. Each sheet is individually numbered. And on this sheet, if you look at the areas that are red, when you shine over those areas that are red, they really glow quite a lot. Yeah, that's much better. A little hard to make out on the camera, but overlaid on each stamp is a number in blue. That number that lights up is the serial number. At first, this serial number seemed an awful lot like pi to me, 3.14, but it's not pi, it just happens to be a serial number. That serial number shines up in blue in every one of these stamps. There's 2 copies of all 4 stamps, so if you got this stamp, you could know exactly what sheet it came off of. I think that's fun. All the orange areas shine brightly. It's a little easier to see in real life, I think, but anyway, you see that. So all the orange areas, including these dots at the top of the stamp, and this wave on the side of the stamp. In addition to that, on this stamp, there's a little yellow integral sign, and on this one, there's a shining galaxy light. On this one, there's there's a second graph underneath the orange graph. So each stamp has its own little touch of yellow, blue, and red. I just think this is a fantastic thing. Anyway, better to show it in this format than try to show you in the facial image. Okay, so you see just the joy that's in this this sheet. Really fascinating to see various formats of stamps. Ted, I love this stamp. Also on the back are some nice cards. This is a envelope from the bicentennial that mimics the stamp that would have been used 100 years before it. Not exactly a copy, but a very similar stamp. And then this down here is a postcard from a French soldier to home during World War I that was both unstamped, as was appropriate for a soldier's mail, and has a censor stamp on the back. So just all in all, a really lovely package from Ted. Ted, I love all these. Thank you very much. Now, if you're ready, we're going to do a deeper dive into those second bureau issues. So let's dive into those. This is my page again. Let me pop over a cleaner view. I don't claim to have a very good set of these. In fact, my copies kind of stink. I could get better copies of most of these. They really aren't that expensive until you get to the 15-cent stamp, although I don't usually buy too many single stamps. Mostly I get stamps like these out of larger lots that I buy. You'll notice that I have all the stamps in the series up to the $1 on the third row. If you're looking ahead, you'll see I have a $2 and a $5 at the end of the fourth row. Those are later reissues from 1917, when stocks of high-value stamps were needed before new high-value Washington Franklin stamps could be designed and released. It turns out there is a lot more going on with these stamps than just the 15 designs in this series. I've already mentioned that the 2-cent was redesigned. I've chosen to put both 2-cent stamps together on the first row. It makes more sense to me to put it there, but I could have put it under the first set. Oh, you may have also noticed that I have another copy of that second 2-cent stamp on the third row. Hold that thought, I'll get back to it. First, let's go over those high-value reissues. This is my table of the 1902 series stamps. That first column is all the stamp designs released with this set, including the second 2-cent stamp. Notice at the top of the column that I show them all perforated 12. In the last column are stamps released in 1917. Those are the two high-value stamps that I put on my last row. Those stamps are perforated 10, like I've noted in that column header. Used copies of the 1902 $2 stamp catalog for $140, while the 1917 copy catalogs for just $30, and that's quite a big difference. The same thing happens for the $5 stamp. The 1902 stamp is $550, while the 1917 is just $32. Well, you can see why I have the 1917 copies. Now let's get back to that copy of the 2-cent on the third row. It turns out there are two types for that stamp. While I put this image up, I want to give a shout out and thanks to Roger, who runs the Swedish Tiger website. I've put a link to it in the description. Thanks, Roger. This is one of those images from that site. It shows the two stamp designs. The differences are subtle, but they are mentioned in the catalog and people make the distinction, so, well, two copies of the stamp. On the left is the regular stamp. That leaf on the left edge bleeds into the white frame. Notice that there's a small line of ink on the second stamp type on the right. It's a little hard to see in this image, but if you look at the bottom left of the stamp, that thinner curved line has a wider spot on the Type 2 stamp as well. That Type 2 stamp could be either 319F, I, J, or K. Those differences all have to do with slight color variations in this stamp. F is a lake color, I is carmine, J is carmine rose, and K is scarlet. There are color variations for the Type 1 stamp too. The regular color is carmine, A is lake, B is carmine rose, and C is scarlet. I went through my duplicates in preparation for this video, and here are those stamps. I tried to sort these by shade. What did we say? 4 shades. Carmine, carmine rose, scarlet, and lake are listed in Scott. I've sorted these into 6 piles. Looking at them blown up, that second pile's a bit of a mess, particularly that middle stamp there. I'm not so good with red shades, but I think there's a mix of carmine and carmine rose across that first row. In real life, I'd have said the first stamp was carmine rose. The second grouping was carmine. That third grouping was a dark carmine, but now I'm less certain. Perhaps that odd middle stamp is carmine rose, or perhaps it's just a stamp where the ink is run. On that second row, I'm pretty sure the first grouping is scarlet, and that last stamp is lake, but that middle stamp is both faded and dirty, so it could really be anything. You can see the paper color variations, which are a combination of ink bleeding and yellowing with age, I think. And that makes identification harder. I think I'll pick a representation of these shades and add them to my pages. If you're wondering, there really isn't a meaningful difference in price across these shades or types. Sorting them by shade and type is more an exercise in understanding the catalog. There are also shades with the 1-cent Franklins. I think these are more obvious. My thoughts are from left to right: blue-green, green, deep green, gray-green, and yellow-green. Again, it doesn't really matter. The price of these shade differences are all exactly the same. I want to say one more thing about shades. I'm super happy to collect shades when there's a recognized manufacturing difference that accounts for the shade. For example, if the postal system asks for stamps to be a little brighter, or the ink contractor moves from one vendor to another, that all makes sense to me and it's totally fine. What I see in these stamps is nothing more than natural manufacturing variability. That is, each time the ink was mixed up, there was some minor difference in how the different components were measured. I'm not so happy to think of those day-to-day differences as legitimate shade differences. It seems to me that the shade differences listed in Scott for these stamps are the result of what specialists saw as they accumulated bunches of these stamps. Yeah, these shade differences are real, but they aren't meaningful, I don't think. It also means that for each shade listed in the catalog, there's a range of shades between them that exists in the released stamps. That is, there's a continuum of shades for these stamps, not 4 distinct shades. To me, that all says more about the stamp collectors than it does about the stamps. Enough of that, back to the stamps. Take a look at these stamps too. I think people would say that the one on the right is yellow-green, perhaps blue-green on the top and bottom and green in the middle, not that it matters much. But there's one other difference in these stamps. Can you spot it? Each of these stamps has a straight edge. These stamps were released in sheets of 100 and in booklet panes of 6 like this. At least for US stamps, booklet panes came out with straight edges along the cut sides of the booklet. See in this booklet a right and left straight edge each on 2 side stamps, and along the bottom 2 straight edges on the corners. For most modern US releases, Scott gives these booklet pane stamps their own catalog number, but it doesn't for these stamps. We'll see in a moment that Scott lists coil varieties and imperforate varieties, but not these booklet varieties. Well, Scott does list full booklet panes, but it doesn't have a number for a booklet pane single. I racked my brain about why they made that choice, but I finally agree that they made the right choice in this case. Let's go back to the image of my own straight edge stamps. The stamp on the top has a straight edge on the top. Well, that's odd. The booklet pane I showed doesn't have a stamp with a straight edge on the top. On the next row, there's a single with an edge on the left. Well, that makes sense. Then there's a pair where the right stamp has a straight edge. That's odd too, isn't it? If the pane is 2 stamps wide, though, shouldn't the pair have a straight edge on both sides? On the bottom, the first stamp shows a straight corner. That fits with our booklet, but then there's that last stamp with just a straight bottom edge. That doesn't seem possible either. So what's going on with these stamps? Have I found some treasures? Not likely. While these stamps were sold at post offices in panes of 100, they were printed in sheets of 400. This is how those panes were arranged in sheets. Along the middle of each of the 4 sides is an arrow and a line. That line is where they cut the larger sheets into the 100 stamp panes. Yep, those lines are really there on the sheet. Here's an example of a 100 stamp pane of the 2-cent Washington. You can see half of the arrow lines, and if your screen is big enough, you might be able to see some remnants of the cut line along the top left of this pane. It's obvious now that there are straight edge stamps on the sheet versions of these stamps too. Depending on which pane the stamp came from, every possible configuration can have a straight edge. And that means it's impossible to tell a booklet stamp from a sheet stamp without specific blocks of stamps. So Scott decided, well, that's not right. Collectors decided that there was certain collectible configurations. In this case, single stamps, imperforate stamps, coil stamps, and whole booklet panes. And Scott put those varieties in the catalog. Not many people collect the straight-edged varieties of these stamps. I think that's interesting anyway. These are my stamps again. The next one we need to talk about is that Franklin stamp on the 3rd row. Notice that it has those weird square notches on 2 sides. Those notches are private perforations. In this case, the square notches are from the Shermack company. What they did is take sheets of imperforate stamps, cut them into strips, and added these square perforations between the stamps. They then took coils of these stamps and put them into their own private stamp vending machines. There's a whole range of perforation styles for these stamps. If you find a stamp in your collection with one of these odd kinds of perforations, you can look in the back of the Scott catalog under private perforations to learn more about them. So oddly, even though the stamp is clearly perforated as a coil stamp, it's technically an imperforate stamp. There were imperforate versions of the 1-cent Franklin, the second 2-cent Washington, the 4-cent Grant, and the 5-cent Lincoln stamp. The 4-cent Grant stamp was issued in perforate, but every known copy was privately perforated with those large rectangular Shermack perforations. Even at that, the 4-cent imperforate stamps catalog for many thousands of dollars, out of my price range. Now I do have an imperforate version of the 5-cent Lincoln stamp. That catalogs for $400, but let's take a closer look. Look at the top and bottom right edges. You might be able to make out small indentations. Those are leftover perforations. It looks like someone took a copy of this stamp that already had straight edges on the left and bottom and tried to cut away the perforations on the top and the right. That would take a stamp that was worth about $1 and turn it into a stamp that was worth about $400. I'd say nice try, but really they did a sloppy job. This stamp is clearly a fake. The last 2 stamps we're going to take a look at are the 1-cent stamps on that last row. I think it should be clear that the stamp on the right is fake. You can see the remnants of the perforations along the bottom. The one on the right is less clear though. First, let's look at my table. In 1908, the post office experimented with making their own coil stamps. Mostly coils during this time were made by private companies, like we've talked about with the sheets of imperforate stamps. Each of the stamps in that third column are extremely rare and extremely valuable, thousands at least, and up to $100,000 if you can find one. The stamp on the right is clearly faked. It's a 15-cent stamp, trimmed to look like a $75,000 stamp. It's a nice payday if you can pull it off, but not this time. The one on the left is better though. If it's legitimate, it would be worth, well, who knows, since the catalog doesn't list a used price for it. It's only worth $5,500 unused. This one looks pretty good, but still I'll call it a fake. The right margin is a little too narrow. I guess if the left margin were wider, it could be an off-centered version of the coil, but it isn't. Certainly this stamp wouldn't get a certification with such a narrow right margin, nor would someone pay big bucks for a stamp that was likely trimmed. Real or faked, it doesn't matter. Any collector would just have to assume that this one is a trimmed stamp. If you think I'm wrong and want to buy it from me, I'll take $3,000 for it. So that's it for these. I think I'll get some nicer copies over time. Perhaps I'll get a few more private perfs. And if I'm lucky, I might get the $2 and $5 stamps to fill out that first series. I'll probably add a page for the color and straight edge variations. Maybe I'll move the various fakes to that page too. That should neaten up this page a little. But that's it for all these stamps. I bet you didn't expect so much variety from this issue. Honestly, I didn't either. I'd initially skipped over this series thinking there really wasn't enough material for a full episode. If you made it this far, good for you, and happy collecting.